Good evening. It's Thursday, October 16th, and this is the Finance Committee meeting. I'm Linda Stone. I'll be chairing the meeting, and we will begin with roll call to my left.
Ed Tate, School Board.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Tony Rapp, Director of Business Administration.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Nicole Khan, School Board.
Yota Pali, School Board.
Matthew McCarthy, Tech Integration.
Tracy Osecki, School Board.
And on the phone?
Ann Hornell, School Board.
Thank you.
Yes, I will.
And I will turn it over to Mr. Rapp.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Before we begin with the agenda, a reminder that for the most accurate and reliable information concerning our district, please refer to resources, websites, and social media platforms managed by the Council Rock School District. We advise the community to exercise caution when relying on the accuracy of social media and ask the community to verify any social media content with the district for accuracy. If you question what you are seeing, need a fact check, or additional details on a matter, please reach out to the district directly. Our contact information is readily available on our website at www.crsd.org. So to begin the meeting, we'll go over the agenda. There's 4 items on the agenda tonight. The 24-25 financial results, the 24-25 interfund transfers, the 24-25 other funds results, and the 26-27 Act 1 index. Before we get into the financial results, I do want to remind everyone that may be listening at home that these are unofficial numbers. They have not been audited, so these numbers can be subject to change. So just please keep that in mind that these are not the final numbers. So the first item on is the general fund financial results for the year that just ended on June 30th, 2025. If you look at the results, you can see this is a comparison between the actual amounts, the actual amount column, which is the same as the current, which is not the same as the current year-to-date column, but the actual amounts compared to the budget and whether the variance is favorable or unfavorable. You can see that under local, state, and federal revenue on the top, we managed to have we did better than what was budgeted in all 3 areas. We had $2 million budgeted over the budget in local revenue, $895,000 more in state, and $488,641 in federal. The biggest amount over budget is the local revenue that is due to better than expected results of real estate taxes, of all various taxes, and we did do better than we budgeted in our return on investment. State money was due to additional money in we always end up, we budget based on last year's special education and basic education funding, so we usually have an increase in that over budget, and we did have some additional money that we received due to salaries being higher, which you can see on the first expenditure line. The salaries were $1.8 million higher than budgeted, which does increase the amount of money we get back from the state due to we get half of our retirement contributions and our Social Security contributions. We get half of those back from the state, so that increased the state. The federal money increase was due to the use of the Medicare funds in the Medicare money that is in the is used in special services for various activities, and we did use some more of that than we budgeted. So overall, we ended up with a revenue $3,403,575 more than budgeted. And then if you look under expenditures, we did have an increase in salaries. Some of that was due to the summer work. Some of that was just due to needing more assistance in the classrooms. So that was what were the increase in salaries. Benefits were down compared to that. Just, use of benefits, and again, we did have, we did better than budgeted on that end. Contracted services, that was higher than budgeted because of legal and legal costs, and also some special education costs through the intermediate unit. Purchase services was better than budgeted by $3.6 million. There were some things that were budgeted, that were planned to do, that we didn't need to do. Also, some of the services that are in there, people had asked for money for that, but we didn't use it. Other purchase services, that is going to be transportation. So that is transportation and some other services, but transportation is one of our main cost driver under that. Supplies, building budget based on what they think they'll need. They spent less money on that. Property, there were some vehicles that were budgeted for last year that weren't purchased. Those vehicles are being purchased this year, so they are in this year's budget. Other objects was just, I mean, that's a small amount, but that's a few higher level things like use of educational programs for certain programs that were done out for outside education. So someone was went to a seminar or a conference. That's something that would be under other objects. And other financing uses, that's better than budget, mostly because we had things like we put a lot more money than we needed aside for tax rebates, although we did have a very vigorous reception to tax rebates this year. They had more than we've had in the past. We did very well with that, but there were still some other things in there that were more than we budgeted, and one of those was transfers out of the fund, which for food service areas that we're not going to be spending. So if you look at it from an overall perspective, we had a budgeted deficit of $1.9 million. Under the actual amount column, you see that we did better than budget by $7.4 million. But we did better than our revenues exceeded our expenditures by $7.4 million, and we did better than budget by $9.344 million. Again, a lot of that is due to our conservative budgeting, and we do budget our revenues to be more than or less than they probably will be, and we do budget our expenditures to be more than they probably will be. So, and then we had, obviously, we thought we were in a good spot with where we budgeted our return on investment, because we thought that was going to not do quite as well as it did last year, and it ended up doing just as well. So, real estate taxes, and our taxes are, some of it we set a tax rate and we control, but we sometimes do better than that. We talk about like earned income tax, that was up. Most of our taxes were up, and again, we had some spending in property services that we didn't make, that we planned on making, like for vehicles and equipment, which we didn't use, but we are using this year. So we do, but our ending fund balance before we talk about transfers, and this is total fund balance, is $37,818,983. So.
Are there any questions about this specifically? Yes, Mr. Hidalgo?
So you said the one about the salaries and more work needed in the classrooms. Was that for the temporary services, or did we hire more people?
If it's in that column, it's our people. And they were all
Did we
Everything went
hire
through
more
the board.
people than we anticipated? Because that's, how many EFT is that? That's like,
No, I mean, we, more than we budgeted, but yeah, everything that was hired went through the board. But, and that's all,
We
you know,
hired
all other
more
things
than-
like overtime and use of overtime.
overtime. Yeah, so last year, did we raise the taxes by 6.24? That would have tied into this, I'm sorry, 2.64 is what we did, we budgeted based on, we raised taxes based on this budget of a $2 million deficit.
In that year,
Yeah, I mean, we didn't pass the budget, but we knew where it was going at this point when we raised the taxes, I think.
well, we had,
Like we were saying, we're gonna be $2 million under. 1.947 million, so we had a deficit.
that was our budget from last year.
Yes, so we budgeted for a deficit, we keep raising the taxes over the 2% that I was trying to keep us at because of the budget. And this is the fourth year probably, and I'm not saying, I'm just saying the ENT's coming in really big. I could go back and look at what I was saying about it back then, but you're talking a surplus of 7.3 million, and we keep raising the taxes a bunch, you know? Was it necessary? I mean, I'm gonna say this, for the future planning, it makes sense to be saving up money for the capital improvement
Yes.
plan. So I'm not complaining, but I'd like to get there in that way than to just be raising the taxes. It's, when we don't really need to, you know, and that happens a lot. And people are constantly telling me, stop raising my taxes. And then we're coming up with $7 million budget. What I could tell them is, you know, well, it's a little more than I would like, true, but we have a lot of capital improvements coming up.
Well, we don't budget based on, but with, you know, I did say we had some surprises. Like, we did better with investments than I thought, and we did better on real estate taxes. Usually we're pretty well on real estate taxes. But when you look at the you know, compared to the overall budget, this is a $280 million budget. Take out $40 million of that, which is, like I said, in return on investment. We didn't expect to be able to work. So we, you know, even our advisor thought we were going to, and do that consultation, set that budget number in consultation with him. You know, a $4 million variance on a $280 million budget, which is not a bad.
But wait, no, I mean, I understand that, but
But we have to,
since the 7 million is nothing what you guys are talking about, like, that's what I said, every year, I said this is what happens, and it keeps happening, or keep raising the taxes higher based on,
I don't
numbers.
think.
So I'm gonna wait till next week, or till our meeting, I'll have more questions for you, and we'll go over it in more detail.
I don't think that, I don't think we'll be in the same position at the end of this year. I will say that.
Might even just get closer to even, if things go, as long as the economy doesn't drop, people are earning a lot of money in the school district,
6.4 million.
a lot. But either way, good news for sure, so thank you.
Did you have a question, Melissa?
Yeah, or a comment. First of all, I
Sorry.
appreciate, you know, all the work that was done with this, and I know we talk about this every year when you, like you said, when you're looking at a, you know, like you said, putting an extra $8 million into a fund balance sounds like a lot, and it is. But when you look at it as a percentage of our actual budget, it's really a small percentage, and I know that every year we go through this, you say you tend to overestimate expenses by 1 to 2%, and we underestimate our revenue by the same 1 to 2%. And if you look at this, this is roughly a, like I said, an $8 to $9 million increase with $300 million. That's roughly a 3% variance between expenses and revenue, which is like 1.5% either way. So, like I said, I think you do a very good job, at least on my time on the board, this is what I have found, although I'll agree with Mr. Hidalgo where he says, you know, we seem to do this every year, we do end up with that surplus, and I don't know what point do we, I would say, take the risk or a chance on maybe not doing it. As Joe said, I think that year we raised taxes 2.6%. And I had always said that, you know, I would have voted for a tax increase under 2.5%. So the amount of money that we were talking about was roughly maybe $1 million as far as revenue between the two differences in the tax increase that we voted on last year. And as it turns out, we probably could have voted for a budget well south of 2.5% and still had, you know, a surplus. It just wouldn't have been as high. But like I said, overall, I think, you know, you guys do a good job. I would just like to see us in the future maybe not raise those taxes and see what happens one year. You know, I know everybody said, well, what if we're wrong? But in all my time on the board, we haven't been wrong yet as far as, you know, overshooting our numbers. So like I said, I agree with Joe, and one of the things we put out years ago was, what would our history look like if we did a 2% tax increase for 5 years, or even a 2.5%? But like I said, overall, I'm pleased with what I see. I would just like to have seen us be a little more conservative with our tax increase that we did last year, and the same holds true for this year, but I guess I won't have that answer until this time in 2026, so. But like I said, I appreciate all the effort and work that goes into coming up with these reports.
So just to, so if you look at it as a function of the budget, if we take out the money that we didn't spend on equipment that we're spending this year anyway, and we take out that the extra amounts of revenue that aren't normally something we receive, like that extra return on investment, you're down about $4 million, or $4 million as a percentage of 279. 588 is about 1.4%. So that's, you know, we're within 1.4% of budget, excepting unusual differences.
Can you explain, though, the importance of maintaining our general fund balance at a certain level? We talk about that a lot.
Yeah, and I do go over the fund balances after when we talk about the interest. But just, you know, our fund balance is very important in terms of our bond rating, especially our, you know, investors want to, and investors want to see that we have the ability to meet our expenditures, you know, readily, and in terms of, in circumstances where, like the circumstance that we're in now, where we're not getting our state funding, but for us, we have enough money set aside that we don't, it's not going to hit us as far as put us in a position where we don't have the money that we need. Even as the year goes on, like right now, a large portion of our state money is going to be basic education, and it's going to be retirement reimbursement for half of our retirement payments. We're not making the retirement payments right now, the full amount of the retirement payments, because we don't have to, because we're not getting the half from the state. They're accepting everyone for making that half. So right there, that's $20 million that we don't have to make. The other half is like basic education and special education funding, and, you know, a couple other things. And we did get our portion of the tax relief from the state, so we have that money. So we're in a good position because of that, and that's why we have a good bond rating, because we're able to weather these problems without an issue on the side of on our end. So that's why they look at us as a good investment. They know that we're gonna meet our bills and we're gonna pay our debt to them when we're supposed to pay our debt to them. So
And it also means that
that's
we
why it's
have,
important that we have that fund balance.
and we have good borrowing power then
And
for
then we
our
have the borrowing power,
capital.
we'll get good interest rates. We do go out the market for all our bonds, that's our preferred method. That we feel that does a good job of driving down the interest rates that investors, that brokerage companies are willing to ask investors to pay. So that's another, that's a benefit of having our credit rating. And also it's, you know, you can all rest easy at night knowing that we're not in a situation where we're going out to borrow money from a bank, a tax anticipation note, and saying we're gonna borrow this money, or a revenue anticipation note, saying we need to borrow money to keep the place afloat. We're able to do that on our own without any sort of issue with that.
Thank you. Mr.
I
Hidalgo?
have two, I wanted to go back to the prior one, but to just say about what you were saying, it's nice, as you said, to have people to sleep at night, for us to sleep at night, to know that we're cash rich, but if we're going too far in that balance, the other people that have to pay their bills have to sleep at night too. So there's two sides to this coin. And I'm gonna continue to work towards finding that balance, okay? Because I can sleep at night on the board, but it's not my money. And I think we have a $30 million, we're at $30 million, we're not looking at before the 7 million came in, all right? So we're, from a credit state, we don't like over budget for our credit, we keep a fund balance up for our credit rating. And as I said, maybe if we were reactive, instead of increasing our budgets based on projected budgets, why don't we just actually have a deficit one year and then say we're increasing based on last year's and try to stick to that 2%. We're forward thinking and we're raising taxes based on anticipated costs. And it shows clearly last year is a clear example. And even if you're saying like, I will take away the $3 million that was in the service because it wasn't spent. That's money we could have spent that we didn't spend. When you're talking about property, right? That's the equipment we were gonna spend.
Yes.
The year before, we spent 3.2 million, we budgeted 3.8, and we only spent 0.9 million, 900,000, just under. So that's good, but then my question is, what did we budget for property this year, and is that extra, we just stacked that on top of what we budgeted for this year, what's gonna be that number, you can tell me later. You don't have to give me the exact.
I could say that we didn't drive up those costs this year because we kept the budget at a large deficit, which is another issue with the fund balance, because now we have to earmark, like it's not the total fund balance that they're gonna look at when it comes to credit, it's that unassigned amount. And we have to assign $6.4 million to balancing the budget. Which is not, which means that unassigned amount, you know, we don't want that to drop precipitously.
Right. But you're
because
talking about
that was-
transferring at this point, right?
Yeah, there is a.
I'm not talking about the transfer, I'm talking about in this
No.
last, but if I missed the first very sentence, I didn't quite understand
No,
what you said.
I'm not talking about transferring, I'm talking about the fact that we have a $6.4 million deficit. So we have to say, we have to earmark $6.4 million worth of fund balance for that deficit. Because our budget has to balance, and that's
Right,
how we
but
balance
that
the
wasn't
budget.
my question, I appreciate that, it's another one. What I'm talking about is the $3 million there that we didn't spend on property.
Mhm.
I'm thinking that you're saying when you said we didn't buy the equipment we needed, that's that.
Yes.
So this year, on the budget that we just did, that we're in now, what is that, so I'm saying, even though you're saying take that 3 million and put it towards, I see what you're saying put it towards the deficit we have
Well, I'm saying we didn't make that
in the
number.
budget.
In the budget, as high as we could have with knowing that we're gonna buy some of those things that we didn't buy last
Right.
year.
I just
Some
wanna
of
get
that
the
goes
number.
to the
Then we'll
deficit.
get the number and then we'll answer it, but I appreciate the extra.
Yeah, and keep in mind that we have, anything that we didn't buy last year, which mostly was due to supply issue. We go to buy a vehicle, it's a 6-month process. So supply issues, and we didn't get them in on time. So what happens is, we end up, we also have equipment that needs to be replaced this year too, that we had the budget for.
So
as
it's
well.
kind of stacked up.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes, right? All right.
But I don't think we budgeted as much as we could have for those areas. Or we did budget for it, and that's why we ended up at
It's
a
another
deficit.
3 million on top of this.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's 3.8 million, maybe 4 million, I hope not, but 3 million now we have 6 million. Mike, the way I do accounting,
It's not that high.
no, I'm saying I add the 3 million to even 2 million, that's 5 million.
Yeah, and again, that's where, we want to be, we want to continue to be conservative, and I get that, I understand what you're saying.
Well, I'll say, you're doing a great job, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, because it's a tough job to do what you're doing, and I think you're doing, you're gonna learn. Budgeting's like, trying to be a fortune teller, so, well, I think you're doing a good job.
I
So I will tell you that
I
publicly.
will tell you that we have that software that predicts where we're gonna end up. And I said a couple times that although it's good, there's things that happen at the end of the year that throw that off. I mean, there's no way that I can predict, what some numbers are gonna come in at the end of the year. And again, also that's looking at what we spent prior years as well. So, that number ends up being much higher than we thought it was going to be.
Well, I'll just say this.
But in the years when it does happen, it gives us the advantage of being able to fund future capital projects, which I'm trying to stave off large capital projects.
Right,
in the future.
so that's the icing on the cake, is even though we're probably raising taxes more than we need to, we're actually slowly building some more capital money for the capital plans that we have, whether it's a field or Chancellor Center or modifying Newtown and starting the cycle all over again. It's just, as I said, I have a real strong conviction to try to control the tax increases, but I'd rather be having, this conversation is a little easier, saying we're raising the taxes too hard, can we slow down, versus we have to raise taxes because we're not budgeting enough. So it's catch me if you can, either way, it's a double-edged sword. Thanks.
Ms. Polly?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback, isn't it? It's like after you see the results, then you say, oh, I wish you had done this or that. First of all, thank you so much. I think this is a great budget. Thank you for doing all the great work and putting us again with a surplus. I know some of it you did not expect, but it came this way. And we know that you budget conservatively. I mean, the district has been budgeting this way for a very long time. This is not new. And I think we had budgeted at the deficit the last couple of times anyway. So because we anticipated that we're going to have a surplus. So some of it was unexpected, and as you said, we don't expect that to continue, but we will take it. And just a reminder that other districts do not have the revenue from investments. So this is an extra bonus for us. So instead of us complaining that it was more than what we thought and it was the surplus, we should be grateful for what we have. And doing the tax increases way below the actual index over the last few years, it's very fiscally responsible because we are able to maintain our budget, sleep at night, make sure that we have enough to pay our bills, even when sometimes the money that is coming federal and local is not there on time. So that is really good. I want to compliment the district for doing a great job with the budget and, keeping us safe and knowing that, we can provide the best education we can. And also, I appreciate, Tony, that you explained the bigger picture, how by maintaining our credit rating and good standing, we're able to do the investments, the capital investments down the road that we know they're absolutely required. So, really, thank you.
The second.
Yeah, I just, mostly what Yoda said, but I just also wanted to ask, because if I remember correctly, and I don't have it in front of me, but the year that this tax increase, we had a maybe 1% allocated to debt service, like in the future, is that correct?
Yes.
It was 1%?
It was about 1%.
So
That's not in here though.
that's not in here, okay.
Yeah, because we transfer, so we were transferring about $18 million from the
Right.
general fund to the debt service fund. We changed that to like 18.3, and we changed that to over 20 now.
Yeah,
So, and that's
it's
being
probably gonna have to keep
that's
going up.
planned for
Yeah.
future construction projects, so we have money in that debt service fund to cover years when our debt service may be more than our taxable debt service, or the amount we tax for debt service, without having to raise taxes in that year. But again, you know, not Mr. Naysayer, I will remind the board that looking at projects in the future, maybe not the projects that we're talking about right now, but projects in the future, you know, we that's one of the reasons why we raise taxes, because we don't want to be in a position where, okay, we want to build a building, renovate a building, and we can't do it because the amount of money we would need to borrow would be more than, we need to raise taxes higher than the Ackman index, which is shrinking every year, and we'll cover
Right.
that later on as well. So we want to avoid doing that. So, and also I did something that I should have said earlier. There is some of this tax money that's built in here, and it shouldn't have mattered because it was a budget amount, but there is also some tax money built in here, real estate tax money, because if you recall, we split the tax increase for full-day kindergarten over 2 years so that it wasn't a big hit in 1 year. Some of that money is in here where we increase money, we increase taxes for
Right.
full-day kindergarten without having full-day kindergarten. So.
Any other questions? Mr. Roosevelt?
Thanks. Tony, I do appreciate this. I think this is good for all of us to look at and to understand and compare between the situation of the district in June as opposed to where we are in October. We've seen this story play out to different degrees, but basically we've seen the story of a deficit in June and then a surplus later on in the year. And I think it makes sense for the district to take that surplus and put it toward capital. That being said, our recent master plan revealed, what was it? I think just generally, I'll say $400 million in total projects across the district. I think also we looked at the approximate cost for a new high school, which was around, what was it, 150, 200 million, something like that?
Close to 200.
Right, closer to 200, right. So is it reasonable for the district to hold $200 million in a capital fund, improvement fund?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, if a high school costs about $200 million,
Yes.
and we're looking to put funds from surplus into a capital improvement fund, is the district able to hold $200 million in the capital fund? We're not allowed to do that, right?
No.
So what is the maximum that we're allowed to hold in the capital improvement fund?
There's two different funds. There's the capital reserve fund, which is money that we're holding for projects run by the district. That's taxpayer money. There's no limit on that. We don't try to build that. We try to build that up enough to cover a few years of summer projects. That's really the only thing that we use that for. Maybe some smaller other things here and there. There's the capital projects fund where you borrow, that's where we borrow money to do construction. When you borrow money to do construction, you have a limited amount of time to spend that down, or else you run the risk of getting hit with arbitrage by the federal government because it's tax-free, and we can't hold it as an investment. So that's why, so what, part of the capital project plan, which we're still working on, or the master plan, whatever you want to call it, is financing it. So, and the way that we finance it is we try to plan based on, and when we know what we're doing construction-wise, we say, okay, here are our estimated payments during that plan. And then we say, okay, we're gonna borrow in April of 2026 for the payments that are gonna be due in the next year. That way, we're never getting ahead of, our borrowing never gets ahead of what we're gonna spend. So we're always keeping that up. So we would never borrow $200 million. We would borrow, enough to cover our
Different
construction
phases.
expenses for that upcoming year, rather than, because we don't want to mess with holding, borrowed money for too long, borrow money like that for too long.
Correct. So that's why I think it made a lot of sense. Ms. Oseki brought up the point of 1% to pay our debt service down. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's something that a board can do within each member's 4-year tenure, right?
Well, I just want to caution you, we're not doing that to pay our debt service down. We're doing that so that we can borrow more.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah. Now, the other thing that I think would help this, or help the community, or I'll admit, help myself if I go back to this video in months to come to refer to this, is to have the years on each column. So we've got prior year to date.
Which is prior total,
Which means prior to June 30, 2025.
2024.
2024, there we go. And then current year to date would be up.
Don't worry about the current year-to-date column.
Shouldn't have been there.
That shouldn't be there.
Right.
The
Yeah,
actual amount is the actual number.
right, okay, good. Because the current and the actual are very close in most of
And
these areas.
Well, it should be the same.
And it should,
It
right.
should be the same. There was, it's just a problem with the modeling that I had to fix.
Then you've got annual budget,
Yes, which is our total budget for 24, 25.
and that's up to 2025, correct? Up to the June
Yes.
30, 2025.
Yes.
And then you've got the variance, which
Yes.
is understandable. But having these years, I think, and of course, not having that column that shouldn't be there would help, I think, when people go back, or maybe they're looking at it right now, to understand really what we're talking about. Because in some cases, you mentioned earlier, when we passed the budget for 26, right, or no, 27, 28, when we passed that budget, that was where the $6.4 million deficit comes in.
Yes. So where it says 1.9 now,
Right, that
it's
was
6.4 now. It would say 6.4 for this year.
correct.
And depending on how many things there are for next month, I have the first quarter of this fiscal year's results, and I'd like to bring that with projections to the end of the year. Please take those with a grain of salt. But I either bring that in November or December for you to look at, and I'll clean it up, and there'll be it'll show you where we were at the end of the first quarter last year, and then where we are at the end of the first quarter this year as a comparison, and then compare that to, with a projection as to where we think the year will end. But again, just take that with a grain of salt. And I'm, I haven't had as much of a chance to play with this software as I would like to, so, and I apologize for that, but, I want to keep working on it and getting better at it and being able to provide you with more information from it.
Because there's 3 kind of milestones, well, there's more than that, but if I just want to sort of boil it down, there's the June budget that the board passes, which generally in the recent past has reflected a deficit to one degree or another. Then there is this kind of fall review of where we're at, where we compare the current spot to what's coming ahead and what we just did. And we also have the audited numbers
Yes.
for the budget,
Yes.
right? So do we have the audit? Because we had an auditor here at the last finance committee meeting where he said that there were no additions or deletions or changes.
Well, that was to the 23-24.
Correct.
So they're still looking at this.
Yep.
I don't want to say never, but we're confident in these numbers that they're right. I mean, Cheryl and the rest of the staff in the business office and the people in the building do a bang-up job of keeping these numbers straight and making sure that we have everything in that should be in. But, you know, we're all human, and, you know, if a mistake gets made, I mean, we're always gonna, like, we closed out the books and said, this is the end. And we get like a $40,000 thing that should have gone into last year here or there. But we're not gonna open up the books just for something that's not gonna make a difference.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that. It's been very comforting to have reliable numbers, at least for myself, to look at, compare, analyze, and go to sleep about. I want to echo some of Mr. Hickey and Mr. Hidalgo's comments that I agree with, and then kind of pose a question. I do agree that it's been very nice as a board member to be able to sleep at night, knowing that the district numbers are in good hand and not a problem. But I also agree that there are taxpayers, people on fixed incomes, that have trouble sleeping because the taxes keep going up. And so this sort of comes to the conservative budgeting, which I completely agree we must maintain, but to what degree? So I'm wondering if we could, you know, out of percentages, tighten that up a little bit. So I'm not suggesting it, I'm not requesting it, but I would like, since you and Cheryl have done such a good job with the numbers, to look at, is there a way to tighten up that, you know, so that we're not necessarily downgrading the revenue expectation by the degree that we are of 1 to 2%. Maybe it's, I don't know, a number in the middle, or maybe it's on the lower end. The same thing as we don't overestimate our expenses to that roughly 1 to 2%. Maybe it's something in the middle, maybe it's the lower end. So with that in consideration, I'm wondering if it would be difficult, if it's possible, to compare the budget in June for the history for the past several years with where the audit was and where we ended up to the surplus, and compare those together and circulate it just to the board so that we can understand where we are in June and then where we kind of end up later on the next year. Is that something that can we look at where we are with respect to taxes, where we are with respect to June deficit, and where we are with respect to surplus to some degree or another later on in the fall?
I guess I'm looking, so when you say June, you're saying before we do all the accruals?
No, when we're required by the state to pass a budget by the end of June, we're looking at one set of numbers. We're looking at an incomplete picture, right? Because we don't have all the revenue, we haven't spent all the expenses. So the conservative budgeting is to protect us so that we end on the good of that, right? But then later, after the year is over and after the year has been audited, we end up with a different number, a surplus.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about. To compare that through time.
Well, I mean, I've given that up until, you know, for a lot of years.
Just for a couple, but I'm wondering if we could do it for like consolidated over 5 years or something.
Yeah, I can do that, but even, you know, one of the things is, you know, what we say is done on June 30th is there's 2.5 months after June 30th where there's still revenue coming in and expenditures coming in that we have to add in. So that's why it's an incomplete picture to say, so where we were, like I can do that with the software and say where we were on June 30th.
Great.
You know, that basically just how the fudge is made on there's 12 periods, one for each month. And then there's the 13th period where everything that occurs after year end. So we could take out, I could just pull out the 13th, give you the numbers as of the end of the 12th period. And then you wouldn't have the 13th period numbers. Or conversely, I could give you the 13th period numbers so you could see where, you know, what comes in after that June 30th date that gets accrued back into the year, if that makes sense.
Yep, that would be great.
Are there any other questions? Ms. Horner? Did you have any questions?
No, just good conversation to everyone. And Mr. Rapp, thank you to you and your team for coming up with that, because I think that's very concise. And Mr. Roosevelt, thank you for coming through with that budget and going into what we're looking at now and still the audit to have that number. That's very important to understand as a taxpayer.
Well, then we can move on. Thank you.
Staying on this topic for one more second, here's a graphical representation of where we are, actual versus budget. You can see, you know, some of it sounds like a lot, but if you look at these graphs, you can see that everything's pretty much well in line. You know, we're not doing too bad with you know, with where we're supposed to be. Actually, in some we're salaries and we're spending more than budgeted. So just to talk about that. So the next item on the agenda is to talk about transfers. So if you look at the general fund balances, so this is the prescribed format for fund balances by the Government Accounting Standards Board. And as you start at the top, this representation here is by restrictive amounts. So the most restrictive fund balances, meaning the fund balances that are least able to be spent on anything we want, is at the top, and at the bottom, under unassigned, is the most unrestricted or unassigned fund balance. So the first up top, that's the non-spendable fund balance. Those are things like inventory and prepaid expenses, which is like insurance. So if you buy an insurance policy, and you buy an insurance policy in January and you pay for the full year, you're going to put 6 months of that expense in the year in which you bought it, using a fiscal year like we do, and you put 6 months of that expense at the end of the year on June 30th in a prepaid account. So that's like things that we receive. Maybe we receive money for a certain program, that we're not spending, but we can't. We have to use it for those expenses. So it's a prepaid. It's something that we paid for, but we're not getting yet. Restricted is the next level. That is money that we've received from a third party, generally, to pay for specific items, a grant, the CREF grant, any money that's left over from CREF grants are in there. Any money left over from, if someone wants to make a donation to a school, but they want it spent on a specific thing, and that thing is gonna be over time, that goes into that fund balance. We can only use that money for the purpose which the person earmarked that money for, so that's restricted. Committed to is this is the board's decision to, this is where the board decides, hey, this is money that we're going to put aside for this specific purpose. So we have two categories of that. Future educational initiatives, which was about $7,763,000, was about $8 million. We spent a couple $100,000 for June 30th on stuff for full day kindergarten, which you had decided last year. We do still have more money of that coming out this year. But so there's $7.8 million left in that fund. Balance of 25-26 budget. When the board makes the budget for next year, they're saying that we're going to, part of that approval of budget is whatever that deficit is, we're earmarking fund balance to cover that deficit. So when you approve the budget, you earmark $6.399 million to balance the 25-26 budget. Assigned is things that basically that's more like administration or administration and the board, or the board is saying, at this level, we're saying we want this money put aside for this purpose. So we have money that we get for certain purposes, rentals, certain rentals that we get. We want to use that to refresh the thing that we're renting. So we put that money aside and say that that's going to be able to be rented. So you know, we can't spend the non-spendable. We aren't allowed to spend the restricted. The committed is where, you know, you're saying we need to put that money aside for this. Assigned is saying, hey, this is a good idea to do that. And then unassigned is the remaining amount of money that we have available for spending in our fund balance. And I'll remind you that that number has to be less than, by PDE regulation and by our own policy, it has to be less than 8% of the next year's budgeted expenditures. So right now, that would be over next year's budgeted expenditures. So this is, the ending fund balance is $37,818,983. We're looking at end of year transfers in general fund balance. So we're looking to, so if you look at, we talked about the change in fund balance of $7.4 million. We're asking for the board to transfer $6.5 million of that into the capital reserve fund to fund future capital projects. That leaves a remaining fund balance of $897,175, which compared to our ending fund balance of 23-24 of $30,421,000, our new end of year fund balance is $31,318,983. Now, something else that we're looking for is with the committed fund balance for future educational initiatives, we're also looking to reduce that amount so that we've had that money set aside for future educational initiatives for a while, and we're recommending that we reduce that by down a certain amount so that we have, because we haven't spent it, and we want to maintain a balance there, but we're probably maintaining too high of a balance in that committed fund balance. So we're asking the board to reduce that committed fund balance by $4.3 million. So once we make those transfers, our end of year fund balance would be non-spendable would remain the same, restricted would remain the same because they have to. Future educational initiatives would be moved down to $3.5 million, and even that number I think is more than we would be able to spend in 1 year on future educational initiatives. Balance of 25-26 budget would stay the same, assigned would stay the same, and our unassigned fund balance would move to $20,786,236 with an ending fund balance of $31,318,983. And I'll be able to go back and forth on these slides, but just to tell you the whole picture, because I'm sure you'll have questions on specific things. But at the end of the year then, our 24-25 unassigned fund balance is $20,786,236. Our 25-26 budgeted expenditures are $293 million, which is an unassigned fund balance percentage of 7.1%. You can see the year before, we ended with a 7.14% unassigned fund balance of the next year's expenditures. So we are near that total amount of unassigned fund balance of 8%, but we're not over. We don't want to be over, but we're in really good shape with that amount. So that's where we would end up with the fund balance.
Any questions, Mr. Hidalgo?
Yeah, thank you. I had questions on the first slide, second slide answered it. The third slide was really good. Made it real easy. You know, when people hear, or I can anticipate, people say, oh, you're taking the future education initiative and you're transferring it out. But as you said, we've had that for a few years, and it's kind of interesting. There's a certain way you have to spend that money, right? And maybe we could talk a little bit, that kind of was a result of the pandemic money that we had to end up putting it towards future education, but now at this point, we're free to move it into the capital reserve?
Yes. Again,
Because maybe
we had
the
to,
rules
well,
changed?
again, if you keep in mind, not that the rules changed, but that where our fund balances are. So when that happened, we had a fund balance limit of 5% by policy. So that's, that's several $1 million, so we had to, we couldn't have more unassigned fund balance.
So we had
So you have to
to
put, you have
earmark
to put
it
it
somewhere.
somewhere, you don't,
I got
you wanna have assigned fund balances, reasonable assigned fund balances, but that was a reasonable thing to do with it.
Well, it sounds good, because once you put it into the capital reserve, you can't take it out, and, except for capital, so this was a holding tank, basically, and if we needed it for education, it was there, but we've been doing really good.
And keep in mind that it
And we
was.
still have 3 million.
Yes, and it was a very uncertain time. You know, people didn't know where they would be from one year to the next, and, you know, with learning loss needing to be addressed, and, you know, what education initiatives they might want to do with that, you know, it was good at the time, but I think we've weathered that storm.
Right.
And we're in a better position with that, and rather than have it sit there as a committed fund balance that we're not using, but we still have plenty of funds to use in that amount, but,
I'm clear on it, that's what I wanted, I think that made it clear, so thank you.
Mr. Hickey, you have a question?
Actually, not really a question, another comment. I just really appreciated that you explained, and maybe somewhere you could write it down, exactly what all those terms meant. You know, like non-dispensable, you know, I appreciate the fact that you said exactly what they are and for the general public, because I know that I had a hard time understanding, like, you know, what's the difference between committed and assigned, but, you know, I appreciate the fact that you were able to explain that in regular layman's terms, so.
Any other, I'm sorry. Any other questions? No? Okay.
So the next thing is finish out the interfund transfers. So we have 2 transfers. I already talked about the $6.5 million moving from general fund to capital reserve fund. Some really good news. We have to transfer $10,951 from the general fund to the food service fund. That is the Feeding Kids donation from Giant that goes into the general fund, but we have to transfer it over. We use that money to pay off student food debt that, you know, for those who need help. So that's a good thing for there. But what's missing from this transfer is we usually have to transfer about $250,000 worth of money from the general fund to the food service fund to cover the high school, the high school free breakfast and free lunch and lunch costs, because those schools are not on the program. If you recall, 2 years ago, we split up. We decided we looked at the accounts in the high school and looked at the accounts in the program schools, which are the elementary and middle schools, and we said, because they're intermingled, we don't account for them separately. We can't spend any of that extra money in the high schools on any costs in the high schools, even though it's not program money. So program rules state that any free and reduced meals or debt service or meals, paying off meals for people who had a lunch debt, that money all has to come from the general fund, because we cannot use federal funds and state funds to pay those amounts. But because we separated out the balances, we separated out the revenues and expenses from in the food service fund between the high schools and then between the program schools. We have money left over this year to cover the free and reduced in the high schools, in the high school program, so it's not any state or federal money, and the same thing with any lunch debt, because generally we get to a point where kids graduate and their lunch debt hasn't been paid. Either we send them to a collection agency or we forgive the debt, and you know, but we're not using any general fund money to do that this year. So I think that's good news for the board, and that we're making the high school pay for the high school free and reduced. So there's a transfer that we're not doing out of the general fund.
That is good.
So those are the two transfers that, really the only thing from this meeting that we're asking you to approve at the next board meeting.
Mr. Hidalgo, did you have a question?
I was just wondering, thank you, if we recognized which Giant, was it in the local establishments, or was it larger, was it corporate, or was it one of the, like, it'd be nice to know.
It's corporate, but we did recognize them. They come every year, they present us with a check. And they come to us typically out of the Richboro store. And some years we're fortunate enough, because they come during the day, we're fortunate enough to be able to get some kids to be part of the photo op. And we ensure with Giant where we're going to use that donation. And it's a result of our families, our community, participating in the program, and each year we're receiving in the neighborhood of $10,000.
And that's during the day, not in the
That's
board
during the
meeting?
day, yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
The next item on the agenda is the results of the other funds. We have, and please keep in mind that this does not include any of the transfer that we're asking you to approve tonight. We have the results of operations. You can see the top line is where it ended at the end of last year or beginning of this year. What revenues we collected, what expenditures were made, how the fund balances changed, and the ending fund balance. So you can see the capital reserve fund, the first column. We had $595,864 in revenue, which is generally interest. And then we spent on summer projects and a couple of other projects. And part of the reason that number's high is, if you recall, we had one of our projects from the prior year was to put a chiller at Newtown Elementary, but because of the timing of it, and it takes a year to order that, we didn't pay for it until this past school year. So that inflated that number a little bit more than the $6 million that we meant to spend. So that's why we end up with higher than $6 million in expenditures, because we were lower the year before. But that was a change in fund balance of $7.8 million. And before the transfer, we have $14,351,241 in that fund. Capital projects funds, we had $301,205 in revenue, $5,955,865 in expenditures. A lot of that was the end of the Soul Finestone and Richboro Elementary projects, trying to spend that money down. Most of that fund balance that's left, so we have $5,654,660. Most of that fund balance that's left is money that's sitting in escrow from actually several projects. And it's a years-long process to get that money released from escrow. The food service fund started with a beginning balance of $2.9 million. We had $4.8 million in revenue and $4.9 million in expenditures for a loss of $184,977. I just got done saying that in that fund, there was a surplus in the high school programs. There was a much larger deficit in the program schools, elementary and middle schools, which is why overall it's a loss. But we do have to spend that fund balance down, so it's not a bad thing that we're spending that money down. And plus, don't forget that some of that money then is marked as expenditures for those free and reduced programs. The healthcare fund, we've been talking about this since the day I got here. We were at like a $29 million balance in that fund. At the end of last year, we were at a $25 million balance. We ended up spending $3.5 million more than we received. We've been keeping premiums low, both for the taxpayers, because they have to pay a portion of it, and for the employees. So that fund is down to $22,257,473, which is still over $4 million and our goal of $18 million. So we still have, I would imagine that, we're watching it very carefully, but I would imagine that this is the last year that we're not gonna, the year that we're in is the last year that we're not raising premiums at all. But we would be in a good position to raise premium, if we're gonna raise premium, to do it slowly, so it's not a big hit on the budget, and so it's not a big hit on especially employees, because they've not had an increase in a couple of years, and we don't wanna, all of a sudden, we wanna fine tune increases back in, so they're not ended up with some huge increase in the year. So, you know, that came up, you know, so we're very happy with that. It's, even though we lost money, we're moving closer to our goals, getting that fund balance down. And then the debt service fund, we had 805,000, we transferred in 20,580,000, which is exactly what we earmarked in taxes for that, based on the budget. We spent 17,915,075, and we ended up with a increase of $2.7 million, which gives an ending fund balance of $3.5 million. And now that money we'll be able to use as we borrow for these projects to again, smooth over that debt, so that, you know, next, you know, when we go to borrow money, we have more room to borrow money without hitting, you know, and again, any years that our debt service may go over that amount, we don't have to increase debt service to cover that. But again, I'll caution that eventually we're gonna have to move that up.
Any other questions? No? Okay.
Last item on the agenda is the 26-27 Act 1 index. The Pennsylvania Department of Education has calculated the index base to be 3.5%. The index is calculated as the average of the percentage increase in the statewide average weekly wage and the employment cost index. Don't ask me to calculate that. But that's what they base it on. If your market value / income aid ratio is greater than 0.4, you receive an adjusted index. Our index is 1.15, so we're well below that 0.4. We do not have an adjusted index. So we do not get an increase, a higher Act 1 index than the base amount. Our index last year, well, actually in the year that we're in now, was also the base rate, which was 4% last year, and we cannot raise taxes above 3.5% when we're doing the 26-27 budget without meeting an exception or through voter referendum. And exceptions have to do with special education spending and over, you know, increases in special education spending or increases in debt service. So and they're not really that they wouldn't be very, very robust for us for us anyway. I think you know the chances of a referendum has. So that's our Act 1 index situation.
Okay. Great. Are there any other questions?
We'll approve the Act 1 index in January, so.
Okay.
Like we have to have it in by January 26th or 29th.
Yes, Mr.
I'll just comment that, you know, I've been watching these for a few years now, and it's a good presentation. I want to say thank you, especially this last part where you really just, you know, how we don't make the, you know, we don't qualify for the adjustment of those numbers. Something's always more clear the next year. It's kind of funny, a bunch of layman citizens make all these big decisions on school boards. It's a beautiful country.
Tony, can I ask if you can give hard copy to the board members?
Yes, I'm sorry.
But anyway, with a couple of changes, like the general fund, to remove that current year-to-date column, and I guess put the year where it says prior year, just say 23, 24, is that how it would be? And then the end of year transfers, that chart specifically that Mr. Hickey asked about the explanations. Is there a way to just put an example next to what's restricted, the That was that chart that showed
Unassigned.
unassigned. Is there, if there's a way, a shorthand description of them that is right on the chart? The best you can do it. And then to also provide that last other funds result, that other chart. I don't know if we need every slide, but those, basically those main three charts. Unless you think we need something else, but.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks, and we can just get that next week before the meeting, before our next meeting.
I'll get it out tomorrow.
Yeah, but we can't get hard copy.
Oh, you want?
Yeah, it's easier, because we. Okay,
We'll send it electronically tomorrow, we'll get hard copies for next week.
next week, yeah, okay. Great, and Mr. Tate?
Would you, just for the record, repeat what the Act One was last year?
4.0.
4.0 and this year 3.5.
Yes.
Thank you.
I believe next year is projected, the following year is projected to be 3.1,
4.1 or 4.0?
4.0.
Remember 4.1?
Hold on. So 26, 27. Oh, they're saying it's gonna be 3.5.
And the following year, 27, 28, projecting 3.1.
3.1.
So the 3.5 for the upcoming year is set in stone or is?
Yes, that's set in stone.
Okay.
It has to be set, that's set.
Oh.
That's the.
There you go.
That's set.
3.5.
3.5.
All right, anything else? Ms. Warner, any other questions?
Well, you.
No? Okay, then we are adjourned and see you all next week.